It is a very new field. There are only two companies actually in South Africa that offer any type of neuromarketing services. Another one is based in Johannesburg called Headspace Neuromarketing. So it is very new. We're still trying to educate the South African kind of business community around the benefits of neuromarketing, what we can offer, and how it's different to sort of your more traditional techniques. So it might seem like quite a big information dump. I'm trying to sort of give you a whole industry in 45 minutes, as well as a whole bunch of case studies. So please bear with me. And I also have a habit of talking very quickly. So if I do that, please just put your hand up and say, Mark, please slow down. I can't understand you. And I'll try to slow down. Great. So like I said, today we're going to be looking at some neuromarketing insights. So first and foremost, I'd like to ask, does anyone actually know what neuromarketing is? Has anyone heard of the term? No? So you're all neuromarketing natives, a few of our panel. Okay, great. So essentially, neuromarketing's been around for close on 20 years actually, but it's only really become sort of commercially viable in the last 10 years or so. It's very much a multidisciplinary field, so we draw on a lot of economics, especially behavioral economics. Hopefully you've heard of that term before. We also work a lot in the field of neuroscience, so understanding the brain and how the brain functions and how we as human beings go about our day. And we also draw from psychology. So my business partner is actually a clinical psychologist. So he's very much the neuro. I come from a marketing and advertising background, so I'm the marketer, so hopefully I speak your language. So you can see the neuroscience, kind of consumer neuroscience or neuromarketing, and I use those terms interchangeably because they're very much the same. Kind of sits in the intersection of this. So it kind of draws on all these various fields to try and apply that to marketing and how we communicate with our customers. And how we sell our products, brands, and services. So essentially, traditional marketing. So is anyone involved in traditional marketing in the audience? Or has used traditional marketing methodologies like focus groups or questionnaires? I'm sure you guys do that to try to gain more insight into your consumers and how they think, how they behave, and what drives their decision-making processes. But the reality is, traditional methods only really scratch the surface of what's really going on with your consumers. I love this quote by David Ogilvy, who's a famous ad man. He said, consumers don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And that's a very, very valid statement. And the reason for that is because consumers don't actually know why they behave. They don't know why they make those decisions, really. If you had to ask yourself, think about one of your recent purchases, and you have to quiz yourself as to why you made that purchase. Why did you choose that soft drink over any other? There are a multitude of factors that influence that decision, and we're not always consciously aware of those factors. Often it's previous experience that plays a big role, and a lot of it's actually driven by emotions. And I'll speak a lot about emotions. We're a big fan of them because we believe that that's kind of the core to your behavior, and as human beings, we're very emotional. So there have been a lot of studies to kind of prove that only about 5% of our decisions on a daily basis are actually driven by conscious thought. Right? The rest is actually driven by our subconscious processes, which is quite scary if you think about it. That means that of your basket of goods, only around 5% are actually consciously thought about. The rest are kind of done in autopilot. But if you think about the way you do your monthly shop, right? You're walking around a shopping center, pushing your cart. How many of those purchases do you actually consciously think about, and how many are just sort of almost automatic and you're just kind of running on autopilot? It's really interesting. So, like I said previously, there's a lot of conscious, subjective factors that come into play when you look at traditional research methodologies, and there's a lot of self-reporting biases. So, as a researcher, when you're asking someone about their experience, they're going to be influenced about, you as the researcher. So they're probably thinking, okay, what does this person want me to say? I don't want to seem like I don't know the answer. So they may or may not give you a truthful answer in the first place. And also, we as human beings are very bad at really understanding our emotional state. So I have to ask some people in the audience, how are you feeling today? Great. Okay. You've got one great. Guy in the red jumper, how do you feel today? Very well. So is it fair to say that your very well is the same as her great? Do you have any idea what range? I mean, my great might be very different to your great. Great? So, as consumers, it's very... And so now I'm asking about you. Your person, your individual, probably the one thing that you should know the most about. And I'm going to ask you about a brand. So there's a bottle of Coca-Cola. What do you think about this bottle of Coca-Cola? You might say, oh, it's great. Or, so there's this range of like sort of almost uncertainty that consumers firstly don't know what they really think about things, and also they can't articulate that. They can't tell you really what they do feel about your brand, product, or service. So what consumer neuroscience does is it applies technology to actually allow us to understand what's really going on with the consumers, because we can tell by how your mind responds, your brain responds, or your body responds to an experience, we can tell how you actually really feel about a certain experience. So that's where we kind of add. So we like to think that it's very much around understanding subconscious insights, and which can be objective. And we also feel that they're very much also unbiased, because we're not relying on a consumer or a person to tell us what they think or feel about a product. We're actually using technology to give us those answers. Cool. So we're all about measuring understanding and also affecting human decision making. We look at insights that we believe are very truthful, unbiased, and also actionable. So our view is that research needs to be actionable. You need to be able to do something with the insights that you gain from your audience. And we're all around optimizing emotional effectiveness. As I said earlier, we're driven by emotions. We're very much emotional beings. So we need to understand those processes, because that is why people behave the way they do. So has anyone bought a car in the last 12 months? 1, 2, all the panel. These guys get paid too much. They're all buying cars every year. Okay. Why did you buy the car? What were the reasons? Anyone? You bought a car? The old one died, okay. So that was maybe more practical. That's not really the answer I was looking for.
I needed to replace the luxury.
Replace the luxury. Did you have, why is that the case?
No, it's Volvo.
This Volvo, okay. And why did you buy that car? Safety reasons. Okay, interesting. So that was a need that you had, safety. And speed. Okay. See, so I'm pretty sure that if Volvo was the ugliest car in the world, right, but yet it was also the safest car in the world, that you would not have bought that car. Great. You would have essentially bought it based on kind of your internal drivers, which you're now labeling as safety, but very much there was probably a much more emotional purchase, and I think you kind of alluded to that when you said speed. I think most men buy cars because they look great and they're fast, not necessarily because they're safe. But I think because you're probably a family man and you want to appear to the audience as being responsible, that might be your claimed response in this case. But generally, a lot of especially the biggest purchases in our lives, like even a house, like when people buy a house, they often say, like, why did you buy this house? Like, no, I like the feel of it. I liked what it felt like when I was walking around. Not because, it had exactly the right number of bedrooms or the pool. There's always something slightly wrong with the house that you buy. But generally, people buy it because they're emotionally drawn towards feeling of a house or the way it felt. And a lot of people tap into that by, and you're an estate agent who used to bake cookies in the morning when they had a show day, because they knew that would tap into people's emotional states, and actually their sales increased, their performance increased, just because they had the smell of freshly cooked cookies in their show houses when people were coming in to view the properties. So neuromarketing, like I said, is a very new field. It's quite big in Europe and the States. Like I said, it's almost non-existent throughout the African continent, other than in South Africa. There's only 2 suppliers. So it's very much a very new technique and technology, but hopefully we're going to see the adoption of it across the continent as the technologies become more available and more cost-effective. David is my business partner. He's a clinical psychologist. I come from a marketing and advertising background. But because this field is multidisciplinary, we've got a multidisciplinary team. So we've got everyone from neuropsychologists all the way through to astrophysicists. Our biomedical engineer doesn't look like that. he looks like that, but he's our mad scientist. So we've got a few crazies in our team, but they've all got a different skill set, and that just kind of provides offering. But you can see it is quite a highly skilled field because it is quite complex. But the understanding of it and the interpretation of it and the use of it in your organization is actually quite straightforward. So don't get put off by the fact that these are all doctors. Like, this is way out of my league. I don't think I belong here. I have to sit with these people and try to get them to make sense of the data and provide our clients with actionable insights so they can actually influence the business decisions that they make. So like I was saying, we're very much kind of a multidisciplinary team. So we've got neuroscientists, psychologists, and marketers, and we kind of work together to provide it. These are just some of the clients that are using it in South Africa at the moment. I thought this might be of interest to you guys. So very much in the FMCG space, retail and telecoms, as well as some financial services. They've kind of been quick on the uptake. But we do everything from retail experience, so how does your consumer actually experience your retail environment, to user experience online, so from websites to mobile applications. How do consumers actually engage with those? And I'll show you some case studies around how we apply the technology in those spaces. Also product experience, so how does your consumer actually engage with your product? Is anyone here a fan of Apple? Anyone here? Okay, great. Everyone with an Apple product, can you keep your hand up just for a second? Okay. If you still have the packaging for your Apple product, can you please keep your hand up? Okay. Why do you still have the packaging? Okay, you weren't the only one. Because Apple's really got that down. There's a whole experience around unpacking an Apple product, and anyone here that's gone through it can relate to that. You know, it's the way that the box slides open and how the air almost sucks out, and the feel of the paper. So they've really thought about the whole sensual experience of having an Apple product. And I think that's something that you guys need to take away, is that, you know, you really need to think about every single aspect of your product experience. Like, how does a person actually engage with your product? And how are the various ways that we can touch on them to really make them feel that, you know, it's special and amazing. Because Apple could very well have just given you the phone as is. They didn't need to spend a huge amount of money on the packaging and how they kind of present that to you. But that's all part of what they're selling. So we look at product experience. We also look at advertising testing, so TV, commercial testing, all the way through to outdoor, radio, print, press, the whole gambit. Store design, so how does a consumer actually navigate a store? How do they find your product? What's the most optimal way to achieve that? And then also looking at product design, so how is that product actually designed? So I'm just going to go through some of the neuromarketing technologies. Now, I'm going to throw a lot of big words out there. Don't worry, it's quite complex, but I think it's good just for you to get an understanding of the various techniques, so that when you do want to possibly pursue this route, you have an idea of what they are and kind of what they do. Yeah. So again, a very short video. There's no audio for this one, so should be audio. So this is what's called EEG, electroencephalography. So these are headsets that consumers wear that we can measure their brain waves, essentially. So we get an understanding of what mental processes are going on, and also what emotional state they're in during an experience. They're quite a kind of lab setting to set them up. This unit is remote, so they've used it to test people, you know, how they experience G-force, or how they experience, you know, engaging in space, or pilots, etc. We use this obviously in market research to get a better understanding of, you know, how is a consumer experiencing a product or brand. There's just some fun examples of some other applications. So that's electroencephalography, EEG headsets. There are also other ones that we can use that are not as hectic or intensive. So this is the Be Alert system. Also highly mobile. We use this a lot in in-store experience assessment, so to understand how a consumer navigates a shop and what kind of mental processes are going on. And all of these devices, all they do is they just measure the electrical activity on the surface area of your scalp. Okay, and from that we can deduce what brain waves are taking place, and also what areas of the brain are activating and when. Okay. So you can see it's quite easy to set up the Be Alert system. It's very quick and simple. These devices are becoming more accessible and really usable. There's more EEG headsets that are actually used for more commercial use. So people will like fly drones with EEG headsets with their brains, or they control toys. So you'll start seeing those starting to come into play quite soon. This is an fMRI. I don't know if anyone's ever been in one of these machines. It's incredibly terrifying. But essentially, it's a giant magnet that spins around your head, and it takes pictures of your brain. And what we're interested there is we're looking at blood flow. So we're looking at how the blood is flowing throughout your brain, and then what areas of the brain are activating. Also, quite far out there, it's a very expensive technique. None of our clients really use it. We do have access to these through UCT and Stellenbosch, some of our universities. But it's good just that you understand that technology and that it's out there, because it is going to become more available and more kind of mainstream as we progress in this field. Then we also look at facial coding. So this is one that's quite easy to understand. So we look at the 6 basic facial expressions of happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. So there's software that actually maps out your face and the facial expressions you have, and then from that we can tell what emotions you're feeling when exposed to an experience. So here's me feeling sad. I'm sorry, it's quite bright. And so we gauge all of these at continuous time, and we measure them all at once. So I'll show you them individually. Then we look at eye tracking. So these are eye tracking glasses. So they've got a little camera in the front there and little infrared lenses around the lens. So we use these for consumers to understand how they navigate a three-dimensional space, so like a store environment. And I'll show you some case studies later that will bring that to life. But essentially it helps us look through the eyes of our consumers, because finally we can actually see what they see and see exactly what they notice, how they navigate a shelf. They look at price versus promotion, what influence does packaging play, and really gives us an understanding of how that shopper experience is done. We've also got units that sit, and we'll do a demo later, that sit on a computer or desktop. So here's someone engaging on a website. You can see that's his eye as he moves around the website. And then we're capturing all of his emotional metrics as well. But I'll take you through a case study that will demonstrate this in a bit more detail. And then there's also applications in other environments. We use virtual reality, so virtual reality headsets, also with built-in eye tracking technology, so you can actually assess like a three-dimensional space that doesn't exist yet. So if you're looking at building a store, we can build it in a three-dimensional environment and test how someone would possibly navigate that or experience products, etc. So they're all quite futuristic, but it's definitely where this field's going. And then lastly is galvanic skin response, or GSR. It's basically a lie detector, so my wife doesn't let me bring this device home. And then lastly, we look at verbal analytics. So we can look at someone's voice and the intonations in their voice, and we can tell them what mood they're in. So it all looks very high-tech and quite out there, but it's very much the future of where market research is going. So it's starting to really get to understand people's emotional response to an experience, and then we can start understanding how we better tap into that, or how we create better products or services or consumer experiences for our customers. Okay, any questions on that very briefly? I know I'm only supposed to ask questions at the end, but I know there was a lot of information to digest. Okay, it's a lot of stuff, but we'll get into more of the practical application now. Okay, so this is an example of what our lab looks like when we do an experiment. So we can do experiments both in a lab or out in the field. So this is just kind of the whole gauntlet of the tech. So he's wearing the EEG headset. We're measuring his brain waves. We're capturing his facial expressions through a little camera there. We're exposing him to a TV ad in this example. So we're testing his emotional response to a TV ad. We're tracking where his eyes are looking with an eye tracker there. And he's wearing a GSR. It's giving us the level of his emotional arousal. And that kind of feeds through to our back-end system. So we work with a lot of data in the back-end. And then we also do that obviously with mobile devices or tablets, and then also in the install environment. Cool. So now I'm going to bring it to life. So that was just a very, very quick intro into kind of some of the technologies, what they do, and then now I'm going to take you through some actual case studies that clients have used. There's going to be sound for some of these AVs, so just hopefully bear with us. Hopefully it works a bit better than previously. So the first one I'm going to talk to you about was a project we did with Solgar. Solgar are a brand of multivitamins, and they've got a very interesting challenge in that all their products look exactly the same. So they come in little gold plastic bottles, and they've got about 250, 300 SKUs. Okay, so just imagine you walk into your pharmacy, you're faced with 200 different products, but they all look exactly the same. And how do you as a consumer navigate that space, and how do you find the product that you actually want? So that was their challenge. So we helped them design point of sale that helped direct and kind of guide people in terms of understanding that process. So this is just a case study. So for Solgar, one of the challenges was that they operate in a very cluttered environment. The multivitamin category is filled with lots of choices and options, and often get confused when on the shelf. How do they create a space within the in-store environment conducive for consumers to easily find their products?
Rocketfuel specialize in translating 2D into 3D, and in doing so creating iconic brand shapes.
Beautiful displays that not only look good, but actually have purpose and deliver on the objectives of their clients.
Create new real estate on a shelf, and in so doing disrupt the category, and the sales and market share.
So we set out to use technology to figure that out. So for the first time, they could actually see through the eyes of their customers what they look at, what grabs their attention, what are the key focal areas.
Eye tracking metrics. So first time to what we call fixation, point at which a person will look at the product, the amount of repeat fixations. We wanted to test the shelf design from the original layout, a new and unique layout.
First phase, we tested the in-store environment without any point of sale. How do consumers navigate the space when there's really just product on shelf? Phase 2 was around actually installing the new point of sale elements that Rocketfuel had developed, and really building an understanding of that. How did that now influence the consumer?
Product recall was fantastic, and product familiarity was very, very evident.
Participants fixated quicker on the second study.
Consumers were able to find their product a third of the time quicker with the point of sale than without it. And we also found out that people spent half the time actually gazing across the different products before they found the product of choice that they wanted.
And we believe that the shelf promoted what we call memory salience. So they're actually more likely to remember features of the product. It makes the product stand out more so than products sort of around each other.
So that really is a good proof point to the fact that really good, well-designed point of sale can deliver on sales. For Solgar and Rocketfuel, I think our findings really helped them and ultimately optimized the in-store display units that Rocket Fuel are going to be rolling out across the country.
I think the opportunity to partner with NeuroSense has been fantastic. The turnaround time of the information is invaluable.
So it enables them to make quick, informed decisions and move forward with product rollouts. Okay, great. So that was just with Solgar. So their challenge was essentially that they have all these products that look exactly the same. How do they help consumers navigate that space and create point of sale to better the consumer experience? And you can understand that if you had to use traditional methodologies in this case and ask a consumer after they bought a product of Solgar, say like, how did you find that experience? What did you look at when? You wouldn't really be able to articulate it, not to the degree that we can get to. So we started using technology to really help us understand exactly what they looked at for how and in what order. And I'll show you some of those examples in a second. So we look at what's called heat maps. So we're able to quantify people's experience and then create visual outputs so that the creative teams building these, in this case the point of sale, can get a better understanding of how consumers are actually engaging with that and how to make it better. And I'll talk to that in just a second. And then we also looked at shelf navigation. And like we heard in the AV, so the consumers were able to find the product much quicker and spend half the time looking for it. So this goes to the point around, after Jeff's presentation, you're now going to go and rally for more income and more budget for your marketing departments to spend. What we're kind of involved in is really understanding the consumers so that you actually spend the money on the right things in the right way. So how we did the study was first we had all the products on shelf without any point of sale whatsoever, and consumers were given very specific products to purchase. And then we, from those learnings, we then developed a new point of sale unit, and then we conducted the exact same experiment to try and see, okay, well, have we actually improved the shopper experience or not? Because for us, it's obviously important for us to quantify that, but then also measure and assess it. So you can see here, I'm just going to skip to the end. So these are what's called heat maps, so it kind of gives an aggregated view of who saw what on the shelf. And you can see with the new point of sale, they were much more focused on the actual products at hand, and they spent a lot less time looking at them. So if you look right to the right here, this is what's called a gaze plot. It looks quite chaotic, but that's essentially where everyone looked on the shelf. And you can see on the new point of sale, they were much more focused. But one of the most interesting findings of this whole study, which we didn't actually anticipate until kind of we went through all the data, was that this new point of sale, because it had this kind of Solgar sun in the center of it, it actually made people gravitate to the center of the point of sale unit and then kind of start their search behavior from there. And very much a similar pattern every time, which is kind of this crosshair. So people would start here and then start moving to the left, right, up, down. And for Solgar, this is really important because they start placing the right products in the right place, and they could like guide people to where they actually want them to go. So they're most sort of premium brands were then started to be placed in certain particular areas within the shelf. Okay, I'm going to play one more AV and another sort of in-store experience assessment. So this was for Coca-Cola. They were faced with a really interesting challenge in the informal trade, so what we call spaza shops and spazarettes. I'm not sure what they're called here, but kind of same thing. Okay, cool, great. So we're talking the same language. Essentially, as I'm sure you guys are aware, the shopping behaviors in these outlets, the shopping times are very quick. They spend between 30 seconds to a minute and a half. So you've got a very short window as a brand to really have an impact on that consumer and get them to change their product choice and say choose a Coke over maybe one of our other products or something else that they actually were going in to buy in the first place. So Coke really wanted to understand, okay, well, how do people first navigate the space? What grabs their attention? They spent huge amounts of money, and I'm sure they do it here as well, in terms of branding these outlets. So they'll paint the outside of the outlet, they'll put a lot of point of sale outside, they'll do point of sale throughout the store. And they really want to know is this actually being seen? Like, are we actually wasting our money here and spending thousands and thousands and millions of rands on pieces of cardboard and cutouts and stuff that people just don't even see and it doesn't actually impact their purchase decision? And are we putting the right information on these elements as well and where they're placed? So let's play one more AV and then I'll carry on with the talk.
We leverage neuroscience and neuromarketing techniques and technology to help our clients build a better understanding of their consumers' behavior. In this case, Coca-Cola wanted to understand how their shoppers navigated the informal trade. So we conducted research both in Khayelitsha and in Soweto, Johannesburg, to understand how spaza shops and general dealerships were navigated. Consumers were recruited at random as they approached the store environment and were then fitted up with all our technologies. We then let them navigate the store environment as they would any other and complete their shop. Mobile eye tracking glasses allowed us to assess where the consumers looked during their store approach and during the in-store experience to assess what grabbed people's attention as they navigated the environment.
Plot eye tracking metrics. Of these metrics, we look at whether individuals gazing, whether fixating, so areas of attention. We can also examine memorability.
We also paired that with GSR, galvanic skin response, to assess the level of emotional arousal achieved during that shopper experience.
We needed to look at all the technologies and all these measures to extract out the amount of cognitive load.
Measures of cognitive load allow our clients to understand what consumers' mindset is during the shopping experience, and they can place communication messaging that taps into this mindset at relevant touchpoints.
We then looked at these outputs and we divided them into what we called System 1 and System 2. In System 1, individuals were engaged in quite quick information processing. They didn't spend a lot of time thinking about things. They were more emotionally driven. And in System 2 was a more deliberate kind of thinking. And here they had higher cognitive load and slightly less emotional arousal at this particular point. We were able to really quantitatively define the shopper's emotional experience. What we were able to give to Coca-Cola was a second-by-second account of the shopper journey in the informal trade. It's really allowed them to understand the unconscious shopper dynamics. We're hoping that Coca-Cola can use this to optimize their marketing strategies and campaigns going forward.
Hello. Yeah, it's on. Great, so that's a project we did with Coke. So like I was saying, the challenge was, they've got this very short shopper journey. How do they actually make an impact and make sure that they're spending money where they need to spend it? And we looked, we look at what's called heat maps. So this is an example of a store approach, and that's the entrance of the store. And you can see Coke spend a lot of money putting up advertising on the outside, a lot of branding, etc. And we were interested to see, do people actually first even notice that, or is it something that sort of falls into the background? Obviously, there's a role for that to play in terms of just having some sort of brand presence in these outlets. But what impact does it have on the daily purchase decisions of consumers? And then also very specifically, so what point of sale items are actually working and which ones aren't, and what's grabbing attention. So for example, I'll give you some brief examples that we found that when they had a Coke fridge that was in line of sight of the entranceway, it far outperformed any other placement of the Coke fridge. It was almost like a billboard, and that's something that they've got to put a fridge into the outlet. So knowing exactly where to place that fridge and ensuring that that fridge is going to have the optimal kind of performance in terms of sales is actually a really important piece of information. So I'm just going to move through that. So it's just an example of the output. So it's going to play through. So essentially, this is the first person perspective of the person wearing the eye tracking glasses, and where that little orange dot is kind of where they're looking. So you can see the eye moves incredibly quickly. It's quite phenomenal, actually. And then we're capturing a whole lot of other biometrics. So we look at things like pupil dilation, so how your pupil dilates over time. And then GSR, so how emotionally aroused you are, and also things like heart rate. This is quite complex, but we give the clients kind of more actionable, much simpler kind of outputs. But just to give you an idea of how the tech works and kind of the application thereof. Okay, any questions on that while we're here? Huh? Cool, and then what we did in this case, it's one book I strongly recommend is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. We just kind of use that because it helps clients kind of understand our outputs. But we looked at kind of two systems of thought. you're either going to be in a kind of system one, which is a very emotionally driven type of system of thought where you are primarily driven by your emotions, you're in kind of autopilot, whereas system two is you actually engage in a much more conscious level of thinking, so you're actually really thinking about that product or purchase that you're going to be making. So we just categorized our findings in that, and we found that people are more responsive to kind of visuals and communication that drives like appetite, appeal, or desire for a product when they're in system one, so when they're more emotionally driven, versus system two when they're cognitively driven. They actually then they want actual information, so they want to know what are my different options, what are the prices of those different options, is there a promotion possibly. So understanding these types of information can allow you to develop your communication strategy to really tap into the right system of thought at the right moments of time during that shopper experience. And then lastly, because I think we're going to be running out of time, I was going to take you through some website optimization stuff that we've done. So this was the study we did with Telkom. Their challenge was that their website was there to kind of facilitate e-service, so they wanted to take away calls into their call center and allow people to always help themselves, and troubleshoot their problems themselves. So we helped them optimize their websites and understand what is the emotional journey of someone on your website. And it's something that I'd like to pose to you guys. You really need to think about, like, what is the emotional journey, or what is the emotional response that we're trying to elicit through doing whatever we're doing. So it could be a Facebook campaign, it could be an instant piece of communication, because ultimately that emotional drive that you actually like trying to instill in consumers is what's going to drive their behavior. So in this case, we did it on a website, because even on a website, you're emotionally driven throughout your experience, and I'll show you an example later. But what we did was really just around streamlining the user experience, understanding that emotional journey, and understanding how we can help consumers better fulfill their needs in that space. So ultimately, we cut down their call centers by based on our interventions. And how we do online user journeys is we will try and understand, okay, what does the site need to deliver on? Like, so if you're in sales or or service, what are those key things that we need to deliver on? And we'll design a study to try and understand, okay, well, what is the user journey that the guys who've designed your website think that people will go on? And then we actually give them those tasks, and we measure how well they complete those tasks, and if they do that or not. An interesting one with that is we also, because websites are available to anyone, we also test their competitors. So we did a whole competitive assessment of their competitive websites and see, okay, well, how do we compare on those metrics? So this is an example of the output. So there's our consumer, that's where his eye's looking over time. You can see the size of the circle indicates how long he looks in a certain area. And then this is his emotional response. So these peaks are when he's getting frustrated, and then that's the level of that frustration. So it really gets us to understand, okay, what's really driving the behavior, how they're navigating your site. I mean, you pick up some really interesting things, like, for example, on Vodacom's site, so we did this for Telkom, they use the word shopping as one of their titles, whereas on Telkom they use the word shop. And both of those lead through to information about their various products. But because you're on Telkom and you're on an online space, the word shop actually has cues around like a physical shop, like you think it would be store locations or where you can go to speak to someone about Telkom. Whereas shopping, you automatically people were assuming that with online shopping, so it was a much more natural sort of terminology to use in that space, and it was actually performing much better. So even like little things around linguistics and wording and how you call things will actually determine people's behavior and how you guide them on their consumer journey. And there's just some examples of the output. I'm running quite low on time, so I'm going to skip through these examples. They're all on our website, all the case studies. So if you guys are interested in the space, you just kind of want to learn more. These are more the fun ones. So yeah, I just want to skip through them, so I'd rather just show you a live example. Let's skip through that. We also created a wine based on a winemaker's response to wine, but we'll get into that another.